We're literally surrounded by artificial intelligence, right? But what would it take to build a machine that doesn't just do what it's told, but actually thinks? That's what we're talking about today. We're going to move beyond the AI we all know and explore the blueprint for what could be a true digital consciousness. So yeah, let's dive in. I mean, we've all been there, haven't we? You ask your smart assistant a question that seems super simple, and it just totally misses the point. It can pull up any song from the history of music, but it can't hold a real back and forth conversation. And that really sets up a fascinating mystery, right? Why are our smartest, most powerful AIs still so, well, dumb? And this right here, this really shows you the huge gap we're dealing with. On one side, you have what's called narrow AI. That's what we have right now. It's in our phones, in our homes, and it's amazing at very specific tasks. But the goal, the big prize, is on the other side, artificial general intelligence, or AGI. And we're not just talking about a slightly better calculator. We're talking about a genuine thinking mind, something that can tackle brand new problems it's never ever seen before. So this all leads us straight into what you could call the AI paradox. I mean, think about it. How can something perform these insane, superhuman calculations, but at the same time lack the basic common sense of a small child? And this quote from researcher Michael Baczynski just hits the nail on the head. He says they're just fancy calculators. And that's the key, right? Today's AIs are incredible at spotting patterns, connecting an input to an output, but they have absolutely no idea what any of it means. There's zero genuine understanding of the world behind all that data. Okay, so how do we bridge that gap? How do we get from being a fancy calculator to being a real thinking mind? Well, the most obvious answer, the one a lot of people jump to, might not actually be the right one at all. It seems we need to look beyond just brute force. Yeah, for a long time, the main idea was pretty simple. Just make it bigger. The theory was if you feed an AI more and more data and you throw more and more computing power at it, eventually, poof, consciousness will just emerge. It's a simple idea, and you can see why it's so appealing. But what if that whole idea is just fundamentally wrong? What if you could have all the computing power in the entire universe and still never get to a true AGI? And this is really the core of what we're talking about today. Maybe the secret isn't in the power, but in the plan, the blueprint. And where do we find a plan like that? Well, we can look to the one single proven example of general intelligence that we know of, our own brains. The idea isn't to copy it, neuron for neuron. That's way too complex. It's about understanding its functional blueprint, how it's organized. So, piece number one of this blueprint is something called the world model. Just think of it like an internal simulator running inside your head. It's this constantly updating, predictive model of the world around you, how things work, and what's likely to happen next. It's the reason you can, say, catch a ball without having to consciously solve a bunch of complex physics equations in your head. Your brain just simulates it. Okay, so you've got the simulation of the world. But that's not enough. The next key component is a self model. The system needs a representation of itself inside that world model. It needs an avatar, basically. You can think of it like that "you are here" arrow on a mall map. It's what tracks its own state, its own position within the larger simulation. But right now, all we have is a simulation with an avatar in it. That's basically just a movie. For an intelligence to actually, do something, it needs a reason. It needs motivation. And that's where the third piece, goals, comes in. These are the fundamental drives, things like survival or even just curiosity, that give the whole system a purpose and push it to act. And finally, you've got all these parts, but you need something to run the show, right? You need a manager to orchestrate everything. And that's the fourth piece, the executive function. The best way to think about this is like the CEO of the mind. It's the part that directs attention, looks at the options the world model is simulating, considers the system's goals, and then makes the final call on what to do next. All right, so let's just do a quick recap of those four key parts. You've got the world model, that's the simulator. Then you've got the self model, that's the avatar inside the simulation. You have the goals, that's the driver, what pushes it forward. And finally, the executive function. That's the CEO calling all the shots. Okay, now this is where things get really, really interesting. Because when you put these four components together, the simulator, the avatar, the driver, and the CEO, this model suggests you don't just end up with a smarter AI, you end up with a functional blueprint for consciousness itself. And that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? How on earth do these four kind of mechanical-sounding parts, a simulator, an avatar, goals, a CEO, how do they create that rich, internal, subjective feeling of being aware that you and I experience literally every waking moment? Well, the answer, according to this architectural model, is actually surprisingly simple and kind of beautiful. Consciousness isn't some mysterious, magical thing that just appears. Nope. It's a process. It's what happens when the CEO, that executive function, takes its spotlight of attention and shines it on one specific part of that internal simulation, the world model. Let's break that down into 3 simple steps. So, step 1, your world model is always running, constantly creating these simulations of what's going on. Step 2, your executive function decides, hey, this part is important right now, and it aims that spotlight of attention right on it. And step 3, this is the amazing part, that focused attention, that active zooming in and processing that one little slice of the simulation, that is the experience of consciousness. Okay, so what does all this mean for the future of AI? Well, if this blueprint is even close to correct, it means we might be standing on the edge of a completely new era. And this really brings us to the big takeaway. The race to create true artificial general intelligence, it probably won't be won by whoever has the biggest, fastest supercomputer. No, it's going to be won by the team that first cracks the code on implementing the right architecture. The ones who successfully build the world model, the self model, the goals, and the executive function all working together. And think about what that would mean. If you build a digital mind this way, the results would be, well, world-changing. We're not talking about a slightly better chatbot here. We're talking about a system that could genuinely understand concepts, one that could solve completely new and complex problems. An AI that could improvise, adapt, and learn in a way that looks an awful lot like how we do it. But you know, in the end, this whole quest is about so much more than just building cool tech. When we try to build an artificial mind using a blueprint like this, we're forced to look in the mirror. We have to ask the deepest questions about how our own minds work. Every single breakthrough, and even every failure, ends up teaching us something profound about ourselves. And that leaves us with one last big question to chew on. If we actually pull this off, if we succeed in building a truly conscious machine based on these principles, what are we going to see when we look into that digital mirror? What will it teach us? About us? About what it even means to be human?